Rebellious Studio presents the Mind Body Podcast with your host, Maria Angelova. Welcome to the Mind Body Podcast, your rebellious podcast with me, your host, Maria, where it is all about a strong body, calm mind, healing, and fully living. And today, my guest is Elizabeth Kipp. Welcome, Elizabeth. Such a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much, Maria. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Elizabeth is a stress management specialist, and she has some very cool techniques up her sleeve that we'll get the opportunity to talk about. I'm just so excited about our conversation, but before we dive in, I always get so excited about the topics. Let's learn who Elizabeth is. So give us 3 words that tell us who you are and a little bit of a backstory behind each, Elizabeth.
Sure. Curiosity, that's kept me going. Creativity. I just am always liking to push the edge, and gratitude. I really came in with that gift, and it's really kind of helped me have momentum through my life.
Yeah. Let's dive in. The work that you do, I personally think is absolutely fascinating. You deal with a lot of trauma, you deal with a lot of pain, and you help your clients release that pain through various techniques. Let's talk a little bit about the body and how the body stores trauma and how the body speaks to us when something is off, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, spiritually.
Oh, yes, you're talking about the vagus nerve. Right. So there's this huge nerve in the body called the vagus nerve. Vagus means wandering. It's the 10th cranial nerve, and it's our social engagement system and our threat assessment system. So it determines whether we feel safe or not. And when we have a trauma experience and we don't resolve the issue of the trauma, then the vagus nerve, it registers in the vagus nerve, and we go into what's called fight, flight, freeze, shutdown. And that immobilization or that fight, all of that energy can get stuck in the body if it doesn't have a chance to dissipate, to dispel. And trauma is not what happens to you; it's what happens inside of you because of what happens to you, right? So, and it's really interesting from a holistic point of view. You can't separate the mind body from the spirit. So what happens in the mind also is affected in the body and the spirit. And, you affect the body, you affect the mind and spirit as well. So it's this holistic view. They're not really separate. Yeah.
Yeah. With the type of work that I do, I get people to become more aware of what their body feels like, the state of their body. And then when their body feels off, when we see a change in their body, maybe in the pattern in which they move, we will go through and they know, after they've been a while with me, they know. So I thought about what I ate, how I slept, how I hydrated, what happened to me yesterday, because we talk about the context of stress, right? If you had a stressful day, how does that impact your body? The tension and tightness that happens when you're in that state of protection. And it becomes a really fascinating experience to where people start making the inner connection between the way their goes and the state of their body. The way, stiffness comes up, tightness comes up, aches and pains come up. And in my world, I do see a lot of physical pain because we slouch and sit improperly and so forth. But to give you an example, and I'm sure you bump into this all the time, I was talking to somebody and she kept telling me about all of the injuries that she had. And I said, have you had trauma in your life? And she looked at me like, why do you ask? And I was like, something. And she goes, oh my gosh, yes. So I don't think we are trained to think that our body is like, help me. And we just plop a cream, pop a pill, but we don't really go after the cause of what's happening inside the body. What do you think about it?
Exactly. I certainly, for me, the way I was raised was they didn't want to hear from me. It's like, sit down and be quiet until you're spoken to. It was kind of like that. And they didn't want to see me emote. And that was the culture I was raised in. It wasn't just me. It was just, that was the way we were raised. So when I had an emotion, I wasn't allowed to express it. So what did I do? I repressed it, and the body takes the hit, right? Right. Bessel van der Kolk, his book, The Body Keeps the Score, there's the data, right? So the body takes the hit. Again, if we're not able to dispel the energy that that builds up in us when we're exposed to things during the day, little traumas, big traumas, whatever, then the body takes the hit. And the thing is, again, you can't separate the mind, body, and spirit. So the mind goes along with what's happening in the body. So if we're having a bad day, right? Like you said, let's look at the whole picture, right? Did you get sleep last night? Have you hydrated today? When was the last time you ate? What did you eat? Right? All those things, were you able to, how is your breath? For me, is the breath practice is really important. What's happening with the breath? The vagus nerve, very sensitive to breathing. We can actually hack the vagus nerve. And when it gets dysregulated by long, deep breathing and bring it right back into regulation, and the mind will follow, right? If we can get the body calm, the mind follows. It doesn't work the other way around. You can't make the mind do something and then the body follows. It doesn't work like that, right? Is that your experience as well?
It's, as you're talking, I'm thinking, like, is that the case? Because I will tell you what happens to my approach to fitness, because people look at what I do as fitness, even though I like to call it movement, because it's so much more than exercise.
Mm-hmm.
What happens frequently is I work with busy, successful people who are on the go, 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 go. And then they come, and I always start by lie down, connect to your body, and take a breath. You must do that. And that's because people lie down and they're like, what are we doing? And I'm like, nothing, until you ground into your body, right? You disconnect from the to-do list, what you have to do after and all of that. Connect to your body. Are you in alignment? And when we first start, people are like, what? And I'm like, stay there, feel where are your hips, where is your tush, where are your shoulders? Mm-hmm. And I think what happens is, and I think that's what you're talking about, that gets them to quiet the mumbo jumbo in here, because they're so focused now on themselves, right? Mm-hmm. They can't, I have to do this, I have to do that. They're focused on their body. And when they relax the body, sometimes tears start coming.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And sometimes that freaks them out. Like, I don't know why I'm crying. I'm okay. There's no pain. And it's like, it's okay. Mm-hmm. Your body is actually like taking a breath and saying, oh, thank you. I needed that breath that you just mentioned. Mm-hmm. It's exactly a very beautiful experience. And maybe you're right. Maybe it's because that slowing down and connecting them to their body and quieting the mind that gets them to quiet and interconnect. Yes.
It's you're talking about people who, unless they have a practice where they, a dedicated practice in the morning to get them started, or in their life, like a daily practice that gets them so that they're used to being present in the body, they live in the mind. They live in the mind. They're like this head, and their body's walking their head around. It's kind of like the way it is. Yeah. So they're like, I mean, I used to be one of the people, so I know what it's like. So I ignored my body. I suffered with chronic pain for a long time, and no wonder, because I kept suppressing and repressing and ignoring, and right. But I was really raised to bow to the mind, and study and facts, figures, and all that, and science and all the stuff. And I was an athlete when I was my first 20 years or so. I was an athlete, but that really wasn't that was that was extracurricular, right? So I wasn't really used to being in the body or being present in the body. And that's a game changer in terms of health and being effective in my job. When as an integrated person now, I'm much more effective. Just like I get more done during the day because I've got this ability to actually pay attention to what's happening in my body and honor that. And if I need to, it'll tell me, oh, you forgot to drink, or, you forgot to breathe, right? And learning to honor that.
Yeah. It's people sometimes ask me, are you a personal trainer? And I'm like, not really. Because to the point that you made, I help people create that routine. And it's interesting to see the progress. First, they come, they're confused, they're not sure, it feels awkward, weird, like, what am I doing? Like feeling my body, like, but as they progress, I don't even have to ask. They lie down and pretty much all of them, they close their eyes and they take a nice breath in and out, and you just see they just sit there, which is it looks like it's not a big change, but it's actually a huge change to get somebody to slow down and take a few breaths doing nothing, right? But that's exactly what they're doing. They're dropping into their bodies, they're creating that connection with their body. And then the question is, what do you feel? What is their tightness? Do you feel stiffness? Do you feel a pull? Like, gauge with your body, what are we going to be working with today? And it's a totally different experience than let's do 3 more reps or 5 more reps or whatever else we're doing. And to your point, I started with a gym background, and I'll tell you, the first time I did Pilates, I was like, what is this? I was like, it's slow. I didn't sweat. It didn't fit the traditional, definition of what fitness is, which is why I like to call it movement. And I re-educate people about the importance of how they're different. Fitness is great, but this is more than fitness. This is mind, body, spirit connection.
Exactly. That's actually a more of a reflection about our true state of being than the bowing to the mind thing that I grew up with, and that so many of us chase. Right, our job requires lots of mental. It's exhausting. We wear out the brain. We literally wear the brain out if we don't have a chance to come back here and do this beautiful work that you and I do.
And that's the thing. I came from a family also of academia, so it was all about studying grades. And then I studied finance, and then I worked in finance, and I did fitness, but my fitness was the HIIT type of classes, the really high intensity, loud music type of classes. I thought I was doing great because that's all that I knew. And then I went through this journey that was like, holy cow, like, how come nobody talks about this stuff? How about nobody educates us and teaches us about that? I've been in the fitness world for 30 years. Nobody ever talked about dropping into your body, connecting into your body. And I really thought I have a mind-body connection, which I found out that was really not the case. But I just don't think, we don't know what we don't know.
Absolutely. I had a trainer at Crunch, which is it's a gym, when I was rehabbing an ankle injury, a break that I had. I was starting to rehab, and he found out I was a yoga teacher, and he was like, "Oh, bring your class over here, because the people that do yoga over here, that's not real yoga. it's more like athletics." It's not all about the physical. You see, that's what you're teaching as well. This is where we intersect. It's not all about do these different positions. It's not really about that. It's doing the positions as a way for us to connect inward. It's the inward journey. And anyway, it was very interesting working with him because he actually knew what yoga was. And it was a lot of fun working with an actual physical trainer. I had been in rehab at the hospital, like rehabbing, And then they said, okay, now you're done. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll go see Jesse. So, so I worked with him, and he really, it was fun because he was taking me through a bunch of like an exercise routine, but because I had this yoga background and he did too, the work became this mind body, he was surprised at my age how fast I healed. He was really surprised at my progress, but I think it was because of this integration work that we were doing.
You know what? I always tell this to clients, like doing this kind of work doesn't mean that you'll never ever have an injury. However, if you have an injury, you will recoup so much faster, right? Mm-hmm. Because your body has a whole different level of awareness that was not there. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing that you mentioned is, I think you're talking about the commercialization of yoga, which sadly the same thing is happening to Pilates, right? Mm-hmm. Fitness is taken, and instead of educating people about the power of what Pilates really is, we're now taking exercises and putting them on the Pilates equipment and calling it Pilates, but it has nothing to do with the essential, with the foundation of true Pilates. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important to educate the people. What is true yoga? What is true Pilates? Because they're extremely powerful modalities for healing.
Yes.
But they're not just go through the motion and make it athletic. There is definitely a physical aspect to them, but there's so much more than athleticism and taking your leg over your head and so forth.
Yeah, well, yoga itself means union. So union of mind, body, spirit recognizes that there is this union. And as again, I said, like the asana, the postures, the poses that we do in yoga are vehicles to get us deeper into us, to have a more of an experience of us. And what's interesting, as you already touched on it in the beginning, we become more sensitive because we're spending, we're doing that work and we're spending more time in the body. And then all of a sudden we're feeling subtle energies, and we know when something's a little bit off a lot sooner so that we can adjust. We don't get sick as much, right? Because we can adjust faster. So it's very helpful for that.
I sometimes tell my clients that getting that level of awareness is almost a double-edged sword, because before you were blissfully living, not knowing how tight you were or how, crooked your body is. But once you gain that awareness, every single little thing and the minimal amount of tightness no longer feels good. And I had a client one time she said, before I felt this way, I thought the way I was normal. I just thought the aches and the pains and the stiffness was just part of normal aging. But she's like, now when I feel even the smallest amount of tightness, she's like, it doesn't feel good. And I'm like, well, that's your body awareness. And you're a lot more, to what you just said, a lot more sensitive when your body, you're a lot more tuned into your body.
Yeah. And also we get a message. We'll get a message. We've been sitting too long, or you haven't had enough water, or you know what, go take a nap, or you didn't eat enough protein today, or you ate too much sugar, or hopefully we're not eating a lot of sugar, but I'm just saying we'll feel it if we do. We'll feel all that, and as I say, we're able to fine tune and course correct more quickly. And by the way, I found when I had COVID twice during the pandemic, the first time was when it when it first came in and we didn't really know what it was. It was interesting. I had this yoga practice where I do a lot of breath work, and the COVID never got below the very top of my lungs. It hung out at the top of my lungs and right at the top of my eustachian tubes. That's where it hung out. And I thought, wow, that's interesting for a respiratory virus. It was that breath practice that I was doing that helped clear that. So that was interesting to me. I mean, I could feel the kind of the aches and pains and stuff, but it only lasted a few days, right?
Oh, I think another interesting point to make is that all of this work is very supportive to your nervous system, like you mentioned before, but also to your immune system, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
So it's because it's integrative, because it's calming, because it restores, it's restorative and rejuvenating to the body. It has tremendous depth of implication, again, outside of just the physical and just the calming effect that you feel.
Exactly. And just like you can't separate mind, body, and spirit, you really can't separate systems in the body. We do that because it's handy for our, understanding and descriptions, but it's all one system, right? So what we do to one, we do to all. When we work on the nervous system, the whole system gets the benefit. It's really sweet. And it's a great thing, especially when we're concerned about the immune system and when we're concerned about the brain, the health of the brain, and anti-aging and things like that. What is it we can do to help? Well, we can have an integrated practice on a daily basis.
There is so much cues, which I'm sure is the same in the type of yoga that you teach. In what I teach, like one little exercise is like pay attention to the toes and the feet and the shoulders and this and that. And in the beginning, people are like, oh my gosh, like there's so much that's in my head, right? Because all of that integration that's happening. But that's why when you talk about the cognitive, like, and how it affects the brain, right? You develop these deep connections and you're able to isolate the smallest muscles. And that's a skill, but it is so good for brain development and your neuroplasticity.
Yes. I work, I have my own kind of amazing yoga practice, but which is a little bit different than what I teach. I teach the trauma-informed yoga, which is a little bit different than regular yoga, in that you'll appreciate this. The people that come to those classes, that they have unresolved trauma in the body, they're probably not feeling very safe in their body. So as a teacher, I bring in practices that help them feel safe in the body. And it's not high energy. It's kind of a slow coaxing, giving them agency. They can modify or they can stop anytime they want, that kind of thing, just to get them so that, oh, I have a body and it's safe to be here and I can breathe. And oh, it's actually very supportive, right? So it's a very interesting space to work in, because you see people that come in and they're kind of activated, and after they've been in class for a few minutes, you can see them, like you said, you can see them just calm down and
Just yesterday I had a client, she came and her body was exhausted, and we actually had to have a conversation about, we're so taught to push, and you can only push so much. I mean, you can keep pushing, but at some point you will crash, right?
Not sustainable.
Stop before you crash. So we did I always customize the workout to what you need. So some days it will be more physical, some days it will be more restorative. Well, yesterday we did like an hour of gentle stretching and a lot of breathing integration and things like that. And after the session, she goes, wow. She's like, whatever we did, she's like, I feel like a new person. And if you look from the side at what we did, you're probably like, what are you doing? Like, you're not doing anything. She's breathing in and out. But it is so restorative to what she needed for that particular day.
That's a lot of vagus nerve work is what you did.
But you have to educate people, right? That not every day will be and if you're having a day like that and you go and you do a HIIT type of workout, you're doing a really big disfavor to your body.
Then you bring in inflammation, and that's the opposite, right? You're not going for that.
Cortisol and then adrenals, and it becomes a lot more damage than
that's right.
Good for your body. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So, well, you know what, Elizabeth, I can keep talking to you over like for hours, because it's such a great conversation. But for the sake of time, let us hear your definition of rebellious.
I would say challenging the current paradigm. And I'll give you an example of that. I had doctors for years that told me that I'd be in chronic pain for the rest of my life. And my attitude about that was, it told me more about the limitation of the model they were working with, than it told me about the body's ability to heal. Yeah. So challenging the current paradigm. Yeah. Especially when somebody tells me I can't do something at that
It's
level.
kind of where this came around. People told me it didn't make sense. I was like, what's a good business word? You know, I just want to pitch in on what you said about the body healing. Whoever is listening, I want to reinforce that your body has tremendous capacity to heal. And we frequently just don't tap even portions into that capacity. So if you're somebody who is in pain or is losing hope, don't lose hope and know that there are modalities and practices out there that can help you restore and heal and meet you where you are, right? That's another big point. You have to start where you are.
Exactly. Yeah. So important.
Yeah.
And you know, the greatest healer in the body, in our life is in our body. That's where it is. Doctors can set a bone and stitch up a wound, maybe give us some antibiotics if we've got a bug or something, but they can't tell the body how to heal. Only the body knows how to do that.
Yeah, it's a powerful mechanism, and it's astonishing how it works. And we should be more gentle and loving to it because it does so much for us.
That's right.
Elizabeth, any word of wisdom or a favorite quote you would like to share?
Well, I would like to say this thing about, we're all mind, body, and spirit is one, but we also, we're the individual, but we also live in the collective. So what's happening with me is reflected in the collective, in the culture, right? You can't really separate those. And I do ancestral work as well. I bring ancestral clearing work in. And from a quantum point of view, in the present moment, you can access past, present, and future all at once. So in this present moment, here's Elizabeth and there's Maria as individuals, but we're part of the collective in the present moment, and we're also part of our ancestral line. It's all one. And I think for me, that was a very powerful landscape to realize that I was living in a landscape like that, because I'm never alone, right?
Yeah, and I started getting into some of that work of how, in the context of mindset, generational mindset get carried over, and we can have a whole other conversation on that topic, because there is so much that goes into that. But yeah, there is so much power into that, and if you're not aware of what you're carrying from generation to generation, it just keeps getting passed to the next generation. And there is so much that we can do from a healing perspective if there are any patterns that don't serve us, again, to heal.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's maybe we'll have another conversation on that.
Well, that's a whole thing, but I just think it's an important, if we're going to talk about mind, body, and spirit being one, if we could talk about the larger landscape, I just feel like just to bring that in at the end, I think it's just helpful for people to understand the setting we're really in.
There's a lot that goes into it. And, I always said I got into this entrepreneurship thinking that I'm so knowledgeable, I know so much. And the more I learn, the more I realize how little I know, because body is just, it's just like you start looking up into something and woo, there is an overflow of information, and it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. And then that's why I can keep talking to you, because there's so many aspects that go along with healing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Elizabeth,
well, I think the big thing is to stay open, stay open.
Curious.
Yeah.
You started with that word, curious. Elizabeth, where can people find you and follow you? And if they have questions, they can reach out to you.
Oh, thank you. You can find me at Elizabeth-Kipp.com. You have to put a hyphen in between my first and last name, because ElizabethKipp.com is a photographer and a web designer, and she's amazing, but she's not me. You can also find me on social media. Just, instant message me wherever, and I'd be glad to connect. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time and for the great energy and insight that you shared with us. If you guys have any questions that you want to ask, please share them. And if not, make sure that you make it a rebellious one. We'll see you next time. Can't get enough of those rebellious conversations? Do make sure you subscribe, like, and share with your